radio sessions in English or also like we will have more time to exchange in depth. I also would like to apologize that Antoine Bondaz, due to some family issues, that he won't be presented in person today with us, but we will have his video recorded that we will present it just after the opening of our ambassador. So, the ground is on you. François Wu.
Il n'a pas besoin de micro. C'est sur la pro, ça va. Salut.
Bon,
voilà.
Alors. Ouais. Okay, bonjour à tout le monde. Hello everybody. My name is François Wu. I'm the ambassador of Taiwan in France. Today I'm really very happy to be here and to welcome吴怡农, coming especially from Taiwan to exchange with you. And Stéphane Corcuff, also a very good friend of mine. And we will have Antoince Bondaz online. Speaking, also exchange the same topic. This is a piece of the Taiwan battle for peace. Actually, the topic of Taiwan is becoming something very, very hot and everywhere. I can tell you that everywhere we are talking about Taiwan because based on the aggressivity of China. This area become something very dangerous place. My understanding, actually, China really have a strong ambition to try to conquer Taiwan and to try to dominate the world. But the problem of Taiwan is that we, in some way, we are people that. Actually just want to live in democracy, in liberty, and trying to contribute to the world. Facing on the ambition of China, Taiwan has also another difficulty since we are not recognized as other countries, just like Ukraine. And for also another very important reason, I believe that the world just cannot accept if China conquer Taiwan and dominate the semiconductor of the world. You should know that Taiwan actually owns more than 90% of the most sophisticated semiconductor of the world. We just have our Minister of Economy, Wang just left France this morning, and she's coming here not only to discuss with France for the new factory. Making the new generation of battery in Dunkirk, but as well as talking with France how we can cooperate in the topic of semiconductor. So the semiconductor is something that concerns the life of everyone here in the world. So China dominates the semiconductor industry. I believe it will be a very serious problem. My understanding that the Taiwan's battle for peace actually in Taiwan. We are doing this battle in terms of 3 levels. The first level, we try to convince the public opinion to tell you that Taiwan not only represent have an advantage of producing semiconductor, but also in some way can prove that a Chinese-speaking society can live very well with the universal values, that is democracy and liberty. So Taiwan represents a new possibility, an alternative of the Chinese-speaking society, and we hope that the public opinion can be on our side. And since recently 5 years, that we got more and more support from the country of the world. It's very important. Japan will support. And one of the easiest things they support us is to tell more about Taiwan. And you know Taiwan is very important. Taiwan is going to be part of China, China is part of Taiwan. See that in the country, diverse strategy inside our strategy, the European power, you know, the first power of Taiwan was from Europe, from Netherlands, then we enter after 62, we become 62, we become part of the and then we enter the period of Japan. So inside Taiwan, we have 3 parts: Europe, China, and Japan. China is part of Taiwan, but we are not part of China. So you should know about that. And to know if China tries to do something against Taiwan, it's not a question of unification or way that we cannot accept by the world. The second level, I can say, is the military level. I think that today our friend we know talk a lot about that. It is to say that any unstable thing happen in the Taiwan Strait. It is something that not only concerns Taiwan, but also concerns Japan, concerns USA, concerns the world. So we have also this kind of very strong will of the region to prepare in the military way to try to threaten China, not to convince China not to attack Taiwan. So in the military way, I think Taiwan is trying, of course, to well prepare our defense. Now we have our new military service. We are trying also to have our own defense industry, and of course we got some kind of assistance from USA, from the world. If China try to unilaterally change by force the peace of the Taiwan Strait, we will get some support from the world. And actually, it's also a very good thing. We got some American military training our troops in Taiwan. So this is the second level. The third level is industrial level. Industrial level is, I just mentioned that by nature, by definition, Taiwan cannot be a Chinese national affair. We are so linked to the world that Taiwan cannot just only be China internal affair. Especially our economic link with the world. So by with the semiconductor industry, our IT industry, our trade, recently our investment in France for the battery, Taiwan is very linked in the world. So again, with 3 levels. The first level, to obtain the support of public opinion. Second level, by also strengthen our military defense. The third level, by our relation in terms of industry and the economic. The world just cannot afford to lose Taiwan. I believe with the 3 levels, that actually we are working very hard. We will be very successful to not let China control Taiwan, and this is the Taiwan's battle for peace. Thank you very much.
So we thank Ambassador Wu to give us an opening on the floor. How do we combat for the peace in Taiwan? And I do believe that today, with your participation, that we started from the first level of influencing the public opinion. So that if later on, if you can spread out the word of the existence of our association, which is engaged in promoting the French and Taiwanese relationships in the public affairs. So we welcome you to join us, and you will find more information later on from our website, from our Facebook, and also from outside if you want to support us, as we are all volunteers besides our work. And let's have a look of how the French researchers of Antoine Bondaz have worked on the Taiwan's geopolitical situation and our role in this Taiwan's battle for peace.
Good evening this afternoon. I would have loved to take part of the debate with Enoch and with Stéphane and François. Unfortunately, I have some family business to attend my father's business, so all my apologies not to be with you. I wanted to go back, of course, on what is going on in Taiwan Strait, and this is the topic of today's debate, and to mention quickly the position of France and some recent events. First, I'm not going to be an alarmist today by telling you that the war is coming tomorrow, and that there is a timetable written in advance. A war in the Taiwan Strait is not a scenario written in advance, and one of our priorities should be actually to avoid it by promoting stability in the region. What we do now, for certain, however, is that China wants to change the status quo and ultimately take control of Taiwan, and we need to be prepared for a number of contingencies. As you remember, in August 2022, China deliberately provoked a crisis in the Taiwan Strait on the pretext of the visits to the island by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi. The instruments of Chinese coercion were all very well known: military exercises, cyber attacks, distortion of international law, large-scale disinformation, and economic sanctions. However, this new crisis was remarkable for its intensity, particularly in military terms, and it was part of a much older strategy to increase pressure on the islands, isolated since the election of President Tsai Ing-wen in 2016. As you know, this strategy of pressure and isolation is also diplomatic. Honduras has announced that it was going to break off diplomatic relations with the Republic of China. Taiwan and established relations with the People's Republic of China. Since 2016, China has managed to poach a series of countries: Nicaragua, El Salvador, Panama, the Dominican Republic, and else. And so far, only 13 countries still have diplomatic relations with the Republic of China. This does not mean, however, that Taiwan is isolated. On the contrary, although fewer and fewer countries maintain diplomatic relations with the Republic of China, this does not mean that the Taiwan status as a state is in question. Taiwan is in fact an independent state, albeit with limited international recognition. Resolution 2758 of the 1971 United Nations General Assembly does not call this into question because it does not pronounce on Taiwan status. Here we need to make a clear distinction between the question of an entity's membership of an international organization, the UN, and the question of that entity's state status. Taiwan has never been part of the People's Republic of China, and there is a state on the island of Taiwan. At the same time, it changes, with Western countries are steadily increasing in all areas, despite pressure from China. As you remember, a few months ago, German ministers had visited Taiwan to strengthen practical technical cooperation, and by my count, more than 50 ministers or Secretary of State from EU member states had visited Taiwan since 2010. Allow me to digress for a moment and add the EU explicitly mentioned that Taiwan is a reliable and valued partner in Asia. Both the EU and Taiwan are committed to multilateralism and the rule-based international law, and share common objectives such as promoting stability, security, sustainable growth, etc. However, cooperation between Europe and Taiwan remains limited despite considerable potential. In 2020, Taiwan became the EU's 14th largest trading partner in the world. Bilateral trade in goods was worth about 50 billion euros, and it's time to step up cooperation, particularly economic and industrial cooperation. We need to bring together officials, experts from Europe and Taiwan to strengthen bilateral cooperation and explore new areas of cooperation to find concrete solutions to global problems. While the China issue is too often omnipresent in Taiwan-related events in Europe, a Europe-Taiwan cooperation forum would aim to refocus the subject of the bilateral relationship to become an institutionalized annual platform for strengthened cooperation and to provide, at the end of the day, policy recommendations to EU member states. And among the many issues and concerns we share, we could talk about strengthening economic security, protecting biodiversity, coordinating development aid, promoting equality between men and women, defending LGBT rights, etc. Returning to the situation in the Straits, over the last 20 years, China's ambition have remained unchanged. But the balance of power has changed radically. China has quintupled its military spending, while Taiwan has stagnated. Just to give you an idea of the scale, in 2022, the Chinese Navy put into active service the equivalent of half the French Navy in terms of tonnage. The People Liberation Army has built up significant military capability, particularly ballistic and amphibious, so that by 2027, it will have the means to carry out large-scale military operations around or on Taiwan, or even to invade the island. While parallels are multiplying between the Russian invasion of Ukraine and fear of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, no scenario is written in place. And while we must be very cautious and attentive, alarmism might not be the solution. Yet it is vital to remember that what is at stake is not simply the influence of one state over another or the territorial expansion of one state to the detriment of another. It is about the ambition of a permanent member of the Security Council to wipe out Taiwan as a sovereign and independent political entity. The issue for the Europeans is therefore not between the status quo and secessionism, as Beijing claims, but between annexation under the guise of free unification and the status quo. Beijing's determination is even clearer in the latest white paper on Taiwan, published in August 2022, the third after those of 1992 and 2000. I would like to remind you that the scenarios for conflict in the Taiwan Strait are not limited to the widespread caricature of a massive invasion of Taiwan by China. They could involve a whole range of action by Beijing. In any case, far from remaining local and limited to China and Taiwan, any conflict would be on a global scale. It would involve at least the US and potentially Japan, as well as other conventional US allies in the region, all countries that are economic and security partners for Europe. And although the NATO treaty does not cover the Indo-Pacific region, European solidarity would be put to test. The conflict will also endanger the life of the more than 10,000 European citizens living in Taiwan would have to be evacuated as a matter of urgency, certainly in close cooperation with Japan. Europe has limited levers to contribute to maintaining the status quo in the Taiwan Strait, and we need to be realistic about what we can do in terms of security. It is important to insist on China's cost-benefit calculation, and in particular, not only that the cost would be too great, but overall, and I insist, that the risk would be too great. We also need to say it at member state level and not just hide behind the European level. As you remember, French President Emmanuel Macron's state visit to China offered many opportunities, some of them risky, if the present communication was poorly handled, and it was. On the situation in Taiwan Strait, Macron's remark, which he made not in Beijing but on his return, raised concern about and among France's partners. The timing of the statement on Taiwan in an interview with a wider audience on the legitimate issue of European strategic autonomy was obviously inappropriate. The present criticism of Washington, without doing the same with Beijing, fueled doubts in some circles and made it easier for others to depict France as equidistant, even though the French foreign policy is not. Above all, to make such remarks at a time when Beijing was launching military exercises in the Strait to intimidate Taiwan and was implementing a strategy of continuous military, economic, diplomatic, and even informational pressure was clumsy and not appropriate. The president has, in spite of himself, played into China's hands, feeding the Chinese narrative of an American responsibility, and above all by suggesting that France might remain on the sidelines should there be a major crisis in the Taiwan Strait. This does not contribute to the deterrence that is needed to avoid any unilateral change of the status quo. Because if there is one lesson, once again, from the war in Ukraine, it is that deterrence failed in Ukraine. France and the interests of the US may not always fully aligned, yet we share the same objective, that President Macron has reaffirmed since maintaining stability and opposing any unilateral change of the status quo by force. In the Netherlands, once again, President Macron clarified France's position, and it was much more than that. The fundamentals of French position have gradually evolved over the last few years. The absence of Taiwan, for example, and the Taiwan Strait in French communications, which I had previously regretted, has come to an end. Bilateral and multilateral statements mentioning the Taiwan Strait have also multiplied, be it with the US, with the UK, with Japan, with Australia, or as part of G7 statements. The French Foreign Ministry, following Macron's remark in April, multiplied explicit signals on the Taiwan Strait as never before, just like, for example, Minister Colonna interview to the Japanese media and NGO. Finally, France should be judged by its actions as well, and on its points, France has accounted well for itself, including in sending warship in the Taiwan Strait, be it in 2019, in 2021, or more recently in April 2023. So France's position certainly is not perfect. Paris could and should do more with its partners, especially European ones, to contribute to maintaining stability in the Taiwan Strait. And it is obvious that the words of the French president are sometimes unwelcome because they create unnecessary doubt among our partners. However, despite the legitimate emotion, it is essential that we keep in mind the reality of France's position, which, although imperfect, is clear on the imperative, once again, for French interest to maintain stability in the Taiwan Strait. So once again, all my apologies not to be able to be with you this afternoon, and I'm sure we will have many other opportunities to meet together. Thank you very much. With you.
But I'm sure that later on, probably before the presidential elections of Taiwan, next January 13th, we will have again maybe other opportunities to welcome the other researchers who is specialists in this topic to come and share their thoughts and the French position with us. Once again, we would like to thank Antoine Bondaz for taking time to record this for us. So now we would like to invite three guests to come on the stage. Then we can start probably exchange your thoughts on the positions of Taiwan's battle for peace. And I think for today, with your presence, we will leave more time for you to raise your questions. So even if you haven't put it down in the participation form, that you are free to ask questions. So please raise your hand later on. I think we will give you, gentlemen's 45 minutes. Would that be enough? Yeah. How would you like to go? Would you like people to probably raise questions? Now it's 3 o'clock. Should we go on until 3:45 so that we will have enough time? 45 minutes for everyone to raise questions.
Not too long, and we will let our guests to raise some questions. And I think it will be much more interesting.
Yes. So, the floor is yours.
是先自
每个讲。
我觉得高老师你先吧，好不好？
我要先说什么？自我介绍一下还是讲？
你不用自我介绍，你觉得
因为
台湾的？
我刚刚没有进到，我在用。
OK 啊，没有关系，你讲的比较多。我看。
随便讲。
你讲一下说你觉得台湾我们目前的
这个题目啊，
对，没有东西没有什么，就在对评论这个东西。
那英文好了，
那你先好了。
先开始。那英文先开始。
OK。我看我的运气掏哪一个麦克风？
但是都已经开了，你可以确认一下吗？为什么都没有声音？
那这是
对，然后这一次嘛，但是你拿到的时候是有的。
好，我再没有。
有一点。
Not yet. Okay.
啊，处理了吗？
处理了吗？好了，这是啊。
this one.
OK.
是没有用吗？
对，
好，这支有用吗？
好了，就刚刚讲的，你刚刚拿手就好了。
没有用就不用了。
我们的对题目选一下。
This is about to be the most challenging part of my talk today. Bonjour à tous. OK. Bonjour. Thank you.
很标准呢，很标准。
C'est un plaisir pour moi d'être ici. OK. Alright. And that is all I have for today. Okay. Every day that I am in France, I am reminded of nearly 30 years ago, freshman year in high school, the 4 weeks that I survived in French class. And every day I wish that I had lasted longer. So I'm sorry, but that is all the French I have for you today. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you. I see some familiar faces, and I see a lot of new faces, and hopefully this is a sign of friendship and the beginning of a conversation that we can have going forward. And before I begin, and I know we want to leave a lot of time for question and answer today with all of you here, I want to thank Sandy and the Formose Association in France for your work, for your invitation, for putting this event together, for your work in the community over the last 20 plus years. I want to thank Stéphane Corcuff for sparing time on what I understand is a precious time on weekends here with us. And I want to thank Ambassador Wu and his staff at the representative office here in Paris for the tireless work that you've done abroad for and on behalf of Taiwan. I know the subject today is Taiwan's battle for peace. I would like to share with you how I see the current state of affairs, share with you what is in some ways an ongoing struggle already for peace, a challenge that Taiwan has confronted for decades in our existence. Nevertheless, a challenge that continues to escalate, that continues to be more difficult, and a challenge that we're seeing on a daily basis that is seeping to other parts of the world. It is a battle that is important not just for Taiwan's survival, but for the stability and honestly the prosperity of all of us here. I had prepared to share a little bit with you some things about what we know about China, what we know about Beijing, specifically the Beijing government, what we know about the world and Europe, and what we know about Taiwan, and then hopefully offer some points for how we may move forward from here, what to do specifically, because I think that is the crucial question. But I am also hesitant to make two professors sit on stage and listen to me talk. So I'm going to try my best to strike a balance between sharing and maybe tee up for conversation. But if I might offer, if I may, perhaps everyone should feel free to interrupt me at any point, or stop me if I'm going for too long. So I wanted to share a couple points about what we know about China, as I said earlier, what we know about the world and what we know about Taiwan, and then where to go from here. And the 3 points about China, and again, I want to be very, I do think we need to be precise. When we talk about China, we're talking about the authority in Beijing. We're talking about the Beijing government, certainly not the entire 1+ billion citizens who reside in China, who many of us face the same challenge that we do outside of China. I think the first thing we know about China in recent years is that it's had a tremendously successful decade or two. What I mean is that China has been successful in changing the world according to its preferences, in shaping the world order. And that is to all of our detriment. I can name a couple examples, and I know but feel free to chime in. Although I recognize I'm the only one holding a working microphone, so very difficult task for my. But if you think about what has transpired over the last couple of decades, if you look at how the South China Sea has really transformed since 2013 to today, if you look at the crackdown in Hong Kong, if you look at the crackdown in Xinjiang, if you look at the conflicts and that's taking place across the Chinese and Indian border in the maritime space with the Japanese utilizing trade and weaponizing trade, if you will, from everywhere within Asia. I think our Australian friends are quite familiar with this, all the way to Europe, where we are today. We see a world order that is bit by bit, step by step, island by island, rock by rock, that is being transformed by China. And while China has done this, it has successfully executed this plan without much effective intervention from the international community, whether in the context of South China Sea or in the context of Hong Kong. And it's been able to do this without much economic cost, again, in all those cases. And so that is, to me, a very alarming lesson that China is learning in its interaction with the rest of the world. Again, I should be clear, when I say China, I mean the Beijing government. The second thing we know about China is that when it looks at Taiwan, it sees that Taiwan is a matter of, in some ways, a matter of survival for the Chinese Communist Party. Okay? Chinese Communist Party's ability to annex Taiwan is paramount in its ability to maintain credibility within its own political system, within its own country. And failure to do so would come at, so the Taiwan challenge has often been framed as an existential crisis in Taiwan, and it is. But we should recognize that it is also an existential challenge for the Beijing government. I.e., it's tough to see a compromise here. And when it comes to Taiwan, there are three alarming trends that I would be concerned about if I were sitting in Beijing. Number one, a consistent rise and consolidation of national identity. Okay, from the faces here, and as I understand from Sandy, most of us here today understand who Taiwan is, understand Taiwan, and so we don't need to spend time explaining. We're nearly 24 million citizens here who, like you, just want to be left alone. Okay, who, like you, would prefer to have our own autonomy and maintain and stress that sovereignty matters. Okay, and that sense of nationalism, national identity, has strengthened in Taiwan over the last 30 years. Okay, that is a fact. That is a fact. It has developed regardless of what China has done. It has developed regardless of world events, because identity is something that is organic, right? That at its core is about us living together in a community, right? Forging our own future. This has nothing to do with what others are doing, who others are. And so if you look at what a lot of the studies that academics have done, even if China were to democratize, even if Chinese economic standards, living standards were to rise substantially beyond Taiwan's level, folks in Taiwan, we want to be left alone, right? Okay, and so that's trend number one. Trend number two is the world, with the leadership of the U.S., is taking a more and more serious look at its ability to offset and counter aggression from China. The United States DoD, in recent years, following its pivot to Asia, is now looking at force transformation, force redesigns, in a way that would allow the U.S. military to compete with this near-peer adversary in the Pacific. And that is a dramatic shift from DoD's emphasis over the last 20 years fighting insurgents in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that force transformation work could come into fruition towards 2030, right? And that is the U.S. target. And so trend number two, the world led by the international community, at least behind the U.S. and its security partners, are taking the Chinese military threat more seriously and adjusting its force structures accordingly. Okay, and that's trend number two. And trend number three is that the world, despite a lot of the trade-offs that is actually being debated in your front pages every day, how to engage with China. The fact is, in recent years, the world has become more cautious in its approach to the Chinese authorities, right? Folks have learned their lessons, some firsthand, like Taiwan has, at the front lines. And what that means is, in an international environment that is increasingly cautious, and I don't want to say hostile, but cautious about China, it recognizes, it may view that it is losing the war of the narrative, the competition for the narrative in the international space. So if you combine these three trends, right, an emergent and strengthening national identity in Taiwan, okay, i.e. losing the hearts and minds of the Taiwanese public from the Chinese Beijing perspective. Trend number two, international community that is slowly mobilizing, at least getting its house in order, to potentially confront or resist or deny a Chinese military operation. And three, international space that is less susceptible to propaganda. Then my concern is that spells an overall environment that would suggest that the Chinese authorities would take the Taiwan threat, the Taiwan problem more urgently, right? With a sense of urgency, i.e. it sees its window of opportunity narrowing. For me, that is concerning because that's where I live, that's our home. And it's concerning because the world and the international community, the policy-making community may not be as may not have the same sense of urgency or may not have the same assessment as folks in Beijing. Very quickly, where the world is. I think Antoine talked about this already at some depth just now via video, but the truth is there is no consensus right now on how to engage with the Chinese authorities in an effective way that works for all of us. Right, we've heard a lot of debate about not wanting countries wanting to maintain their autonomy, right? Strategic autonomy, and that is true in Europe, right? Strategic autonomy, and that means your strategic interests may not always align with the United States and may not always align with Taiwan, okay? But we all see the predatory practices that's coming out of just on the economic front alone. Right? So how do we deal with that, right? I've heard over the past week of my visits, three interesting words. Partner, competitor, rival. Right, 3 words. Is that right? Right, so to define and frame the Chinese relationship in those 3 words. At once, partner in some areas, competitors in some areas, and rival in others. My fear is that seems like a pragmatic approach, okay? But it's also, if you look at these 3 words, it seems like we are hedging. It seems a little bit wishy-washy because how can a rival be a partner at the same time? Anyone who's ever survived in the schoolyard would know that your rival in one period it's hard to become a friend or partner in another. And so my fear, though, is that this is not just a transitory policy and transition. I'm afraid that is just going to be an end state. And as an end state, it communicates lack of conviction. It communicates unclear assessment of the situation. It communicates, I'm very afraid, weakness. Okay, and I'd be the last person here to criticize anyone's foreign policy. I'm speaking from personal experience, from Taiwan's perspective. Taiwan decades ago has had a policy or a lot of discussion around something called the 1992 consensus. Some of you may be a bit familiar with. To me, that is the same approach. Okay, it is attempting to make a distinction where one should not exist. It is an approach. The 1992 consensus, depending on who you ask, is framed in essentially that we can all agree to disagree. We can all agree there is one China, but let's not talk about which China that is. Okay, and then in broad strokes. Okay, in broad strokes. But the concern again is that that approach is far from constructive. And so now, what does that mean, right? And I think this stress and the sort of the aspiration for strategic autonomy is very clear, and Taiwan aspires and insists on it as well. It's just within the context of autonomy, can we, in a democracy, especially in a collective community that stresses consensus building, how soon can we come to a consensus on the true nature of a relationship with a partner who, on the economic front alone, is not engaging in fair play? Not to mention on the security front. To make matters worse, from the Chinese government's perspective, it's the same thing, right? We would like to separate economy and trade from security. We would like to trade where we can and talk about security. Then we'll have some of the more difficult challenges, some of the more difficult conversations elsewhere. But from the Chinese perspective, it's one and the same. And we can talk about the United Front's efforts. But I hope that this is, if you disagree, we'd be happy to talk about this later as well. My last point about where Europe is having been a very, I have high hopes for where Europe and the EU will come out on security across straits, despite everything I've said. That is because Europe has had a leading role in progressive values in the world. Decades ago, you were the first to ban capital punishment because you believe in the universal truth of human dignity. Yesterday, I was at a restaurant where I met a schnauzer named Milou, and Milou had a tail, which is something you don't see in the rest of the world because long ago, Europe took a leadership role in banning the docking of dog tails. These are right things to do, whether it's in human rights or animal rights. You know, speaking up for the voiceless, for the powerless, standing up for basic dignity, whether you walk on 2 feet or 4. And so I believe, I still have high hopes that Europe will come out on this issue and take a stand where it matters. Although I will also paraphrase Ambassador Wu in saying that we are not naive in thinking that if Taiwan were to face the conflict, were to be invaded, that all our friends would rush to the front lines and join forces. But there are many ways to help, indeed. The third part, really, observation on where we are in Taiwan. But I am conscious of the time I've already taken up, and so maybe where we are in Taiwan, I can leave for the Q&A, and maybe in our subsequent conversation, because I think we have just an hour left in the space.
90 minutes.
90 minutes? All right.
90 minutes. I think we need to leave this area by before 5 o'clock.
Okay.
We were invited Stéphane also to say something, and then
Does that work?
I think.
So which language should I start with? Maybe a little bit of French first.
French, yes, we'll do. And
Déjà, une petite phrase pour dire merci à l'organisation.
merci d'être venu.
And it seems that he speaks French so well that I could spare.
Oh, we will
I
learn.
could spare my English presentation and directly speak in Chinese or French, no?
Well, I think we will either have our Ambassador Murmur next to Enoch. If you want to do that in French, I think that would be
No, but that's okay.
that
I
would be
will use
nice
English.
to.
I'm not against English, it's just that I love English, but it's awkward to speak English with you or so many French people. Whatever.
Yeah.
Enoch, it's an immense pleasure to have you here. I think for us, all of us, we feel very gifted and very happy to see you and to hear you. It's priceless, and I hope that you will have many questions and that we can learn more about Taiwan and your experience there, especially what you do to prepare the civil society to deal with the conditions of a possible war. So I'll try to be short too, and if I don't have time, I will leave my next points to the Q&A, okay? So one of the points I would like to make here, and not as a professor, I'm not coming with these stages, is to propose a few ideas, especially about the ongoing arms race in Asia and in the world, more globally. Everybody knows that there is a global arms race right now. And of course, for many people, it's scary, and it is indeed scary. But in case a war breaks out in the Taiwan Strait, or somewhere else, and where Taiwan in the end may be involved, I can try to forecast that after a war, even especially a global one, historians will start to write books about how this happened, what are the approximate reasons and the more distant reasons to explain what happened, and probably many people will explain this with the arms race and the need to assert one's position in the world or to defend it. Well, that's the Thucydide trap that many are mentioning, le piège de Thucydide, which would present the United States as being afraid to lose its dominant position in the world, and China wanted to strive to replace America as the global power. Well, this is very debatable, of course. But what I would like to say here is that if, unfortunately, this happens one day, we should remind that by now, before any war happens, in case one war breaks out, Taiwan lags behind in terms of weapon, in terms of defense. Taiwan cannot defend itself alone. Taiwan needs support and is really lacking behind in terms of weapon. Not later than yesterday, 3 members of Congress wrote to the Secretary of State, who is going to Beijing. By the way, he arrived today, I think, yes. And urging him to make a stopover in Taiwan, before or after. That's interesting because in case the Secretary of State will not do that, but in case he would do that, and then he would need to probably go to a 3rd place before, like in Hong Kong or in Korea or in Tokyo, because going to Taiwan just after going to the PRC would in a way assert that America recognizes that to some extent Taiwan is a part of China. And that question is very technical, but this is why we usually, when there is the, comment on dit la flamme? The flame for the Asian Games is never going from mainland China to Taiwan directly, because then that would assert that Taiwan is a part of China. So, of course, he would not do that. But the main point is that in their letter published today, they reminded the Secretary of State that there are packages of weapon sales that have been delayed by so many years. And they mentioned the package that was sold in 2019, and that is still not delivered to Taiwan, stressing the importance to send weapons and, of course, to train people to use them as soon as possible, because Taiwan is lacking time. So really, we should remember this. By this day, Taiwan is lacking behind in terms of weapons, and would never be, it should not be allowed to say that Taiwan has played a role in fostering a war in the Taiwan Strait. This is certainly not the case. And also, because in France, there are so many people who are anti-American. And by the same token, most sympathetic to Chinese position for the reason, the only reason, that they are against America. That is a mental problem in our country, and I urge everyone to think about that. We can be independent from the US, and we should, but does this mean that we must close our eyes on what foes of America are doing just precisely because we don't like America? This is stupidity. And stupidity that leads people really to close their eyes to things that Beijing is doing is very terrible. And those people are considering that America is fostering war in the Taiwan Strait. But let's make it very clear. If there is a core national interest in the US regarding the Taiwan Strait. It is the status quo, full stop. It's not war, and it's not promoting the proclamation of a new independent state called Formosa. I don't speak of Shenpu to be, because it's a complex question. I'm speaking of Gaikou. I think everybody knows the difference, right? So the interest of America is stated clearly everywhere in America, status quo. So once again, we should not have a simple reasoning and saying that America, because of this Thucydides trap, is fostering a war in the Taiwan Strait to be sure that they will be able to destroy China before it becomes the world power.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think today, just to be philosophical, because we just had a French back now, the questions on the philosophy. People is always saying, all the democracies, the Western countries today says we want to keep a status quo. Okay, what is status quo? Is it possible? Because in Buddhism, nothing is constant. When you say status quo, it's already changing. So the status quo 5 years ago, or a year ago, or a month ago of Taiwan is completely different. Can you imagine that right now, last week we had our ministers of economists visiting France, that will not take place about a year ago. So there is no such quo as such a thing. I think it's a bit hypocrite or kind of fly out of it. Yeah, I think it's just a term that we use in diplomacy to avoid discussing what is on the table. Well, I don't know, as a professor of the science school, how do you think about that?
I would love to speak about the status quo if we have time. So the Q&A session has not yet started, okay? Just give me 1 or 2 more seconds. Second point, I would like to discuss the declaration by Emmanuel Macron, our president. Of course, much has been said about this, but I maybe have my 2 cents to add, especially in front of our friend coming from Taiwan. Many reasons, of course, have been mobilized to explain this, one of which being the kind of trade-off that has been asked by Xi Jinping, President Xi Jinping, in return to for contracts, of course. There is probably another point that everybody saw more or less clearly, is that he left France in a very difficult situation because of the strikes, and probably expected from that visit of China and of President Xi Jinping. I'm reluctant in saying President Xi Jinping because technically a president should be democratically elected, but let's use that word because everybody's using it. And Zhu Xi is not exactly president anyway.
Yeah.
Yes, it's chairman, exactly. And probably he expected people in France to see him as a great president in international politics, being able to speak directly to President Xi and asking him to have a word on Ukraine with President Putin. Whether it happened or not, this is actually not my point. What I want to say is that he expected that, in a way, he would come back to France with a better image after this trip. And you know what happened? He was heavily criticized. And during the following 3 days, both his Ministry of Foreign Affairs and more generally government and the Élysée Palace did their best to explain that he had been heavily misunderstood, as always. But in this process, the palace on Sunday, 3 days after, gave an interesting information. The palace said that the president was quite surprised about the amount of the kind of reaction he had from the press and the public. And this is my point. I'm truly thinking that President Macron, of course, wanted to play a Gaullist role, right? Talking, as President de Gaulle said, directly to China because we want to be directly heard from China. That's what he said in 1964 when he recognized PRC. The problem is that China today is not China by then, and so are we. And what is most important to notice is that probably President Macron did not expect people to know more, to know that much the situation in China and in Taiwan and between the two countries today. And what you said, it can be also translated to what he said. I believe that what happened after his declaration probably would not have happened three years ago. 3 years ago started a process in which China lost a lot of its credibility and Taiwan gained a lot of credibility, or was better perceived, actually. And President Macron did not realize that French society and French media had changed a lot about Taiwan and changed a lot about China. And he probably thought that he could be very cheap and have a cheap argument, and people would buy it by thinking that, well, he is the president of a very big and important country, and Taiwan is not so important. But his conclusion that Europe's strategic independence does not go through Taiwan, that Taiwan is not part of it, is utterly wrong, because it's precisely the opposite. In many ways, we could say that Europe's strategic independence relies on Taiwan's stability. And I'm puzzled by such a mistake by our president, who is not, as you probably know, a stupid guy. So the public has changed, and I have a very, very tiny detail or sentence I can give you. I was on the train earlier on, as you said, to come to here from Lyon, and I had a nice chat with the guy sitting next to me, charming person. So of course it was nice to talk to him, and very well educated. I decided to pay a coffee to him and chat. After a while, I realized that he was an educated person and that he started to be interested in international politics and geopolitics since a while. His training was engineer, so it was not like doing international relations. So he was the perfect guy for me to ask him, well, you don't know probably much about China and Taiwan, but you're interested in that discipline. So what is the first idea that comes to your mind if I ask you, what is Taiwan today and what is the problem? What's happening there? The very first idea and sentence he said was, Taiwan must rearm very quickly. Speaking the truth. And I said, why? And he said, because China is always explicitly stating its determination to attack, whether it is true or not. Interesting. And he said, well, you are not showing your teeth if you're not going to attack, and if you want to shake hands just afterwards. And he was reading what? Sun Tzu Bingfa. At the same time, The Art of War of Sun Tzu. And that is what he didn't see, is that China is very apt at using this strategy, and that has been going on from Sun Tzu to Mao Zedong and the present Communist Party, to yell, to frighten, to make noise in order to deter people to attack. So the problem we mentioned is that we are absolutely sure that China is building an army able at least to do what we call entry denial and to make it as costly as possible for Americans to protect Taiwan. But we are not 100% sure that they are determined to attack, because they know the cost. And also, one point, to make a long debate way too short, is that of course we are sure that Xi Jinping is absolutely a nationalistic leader and is committed to uniting Taiwan to China. But one point we often oversee is that the CCP's cardinal rule, the top one priority for the CCP, even probably before uniting the so-called motherland, is to remain in power, to ensure that no kind of big upheaval, social upheaval, leads to or economic like a pandemic, would lead to a political upheaval so strong that it might lose power. This is very important. So the problem now is that if we are not 100% sure that China is crazy enough to do what would certainly impact not only Taiwan and America and the global economy, but also China before everything, then China in a way wins. That's her strategic ambiguity. And for this, we have to prepare for war. That's always the cardinal rule. So back to my first point. If Taiwan rearms now, it doesn't mean that Taiwan is nurturing a possible war, and that is very important. I will finish with 2 points, and I will try to be more brief. The first is, why should we support Taiwan? Many people have many reasons, or tell us many different reasons. One is technology, our dependency on Taiwan's chips and microprocessors, for sure is very important. Or the global economy that would probably have to deal will suffer a very deep impact, that's true. Another set of reasons, and I truly believe it's true, it's very important, is values. We discuss this very often, and I'm not sure that this really is very important for many leaders, especially in France. Taiwan is a democratic country, and just for this mere reason, we should support it. But if we wipe away all these reasons, technology, economy, or values, there is a simple reason that we must keep saying, it's morality. Just because in Taiwan, we have 23 million people who are menaced of being erased by missiles, disappearing under horrible suffering. Not a part of the population, not a part of the island, but the whole population, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm not trying to make provisions about the future, but many military tactics that are discussing with the conquest of the Taiwanese land by Chinese forces are missing one point: to land on Taiwan. And this is very unlikely that China can actively and effectively ferry people enough soldiers to land on Taiwan, because their ships would be sunk before. So there is, of course, the question of the blockade, whether naval or aerial, but the same happens. It's very dangerous and technically very difficult to say, which means that in case China is decided to, is committed to do this, probably will resort at first to that solution they have, is to fire thousands of missiles on Taiwan. And if they do so, then people will realize that it's not a little problem of an island being blockaded for a few weeks, but that is a question of a whole population being erased by that dictatorship. Of course, there are different interpretations of it. One being that China would be smart enough to direct its missiles to key political, technological, and military sites. But this is not proven, and as we say, the strategy might be to keep the island, but with no inhabitants in it. So this is a real danger, a real possibility. And if you lack arguments with friends, families, with whom you're discussing Taiwan, and maybe your bottom line, your last argument can be this: humanity simply. There are many other questions I would be very happy to discuss, but in order not to be too long, maybe I'm giving the floor to John or to Q&A.
Yeah, we begin the Q&A.
En fait, j'aimerais bien faire écho sur ce que vient de dire Stéphane. parce que sur le magazine Le Point, en fait, il y a peut-être quelques semaines.
C'était la semaine dernière.
Voilà, donc la couverture des Taïwan, la carte qui vient. Est-ce qu'on arrive à projeter ce que
je l'ai amené, je peux le montrer.
Je l'ai amené.
C'est que le projecteur il va briller dans les yeux.
Ouais, c'est pas grave.
D'accord. En fait,
C'est pas grave.
tu l'as parce que je l'ai pas avec moi, en fait. Ah oui, c'est super. Voilà, c'est super. Voilà. Je ne suis pas sûre que si vous l'avez tous lu, en fait, Taïwan était sous la couverture, la carte qui vient. Donc à l'intérieur, on avait parlé. Voilà. Oui, on délaissera le temps de prendre part à l'histoire tout à l'heure. Parce qu'en fait, à l'intérieur, il parle de la dernière exercice des réservistes taïwanaises au mois de. 因为我们上次是什么时候？后备军人是5月嘛，au mois de mai, si je me rappelle bien, voilà. Et là, à l'intérieur, en fait, on vient de parler de la comparaison entre la force militaire chinoise et puis la force taïwanaise. Donc, on voit très bien, il y a une grande différence quand même, que par rapport aux soldats, qu'à Taïwan, on a 163 000 soldats présents et la Chine, 2000 combien? Pour ceux qui n'ont pas lu ou ceux qui ont lu n'ont pas les chiffres. En Chine, on a plus de 2 millions de soldats. On a 2 millions de soldats, comme tu dis, je pense que tout le monde crache sur nous, on va se noyer. Voilà. Et après, par rapport aux missiles ou les chasse-avions, par exemple, là, par rapport aux missiles balistiques, ils ont 589 et que les missiles de croisière, ils sont 108. Et à Taïwan, on a 0.
Mais il y en a des milliers.
Il y a des milliers qui sont visés sur Taïwan. Ok, donc il n'y a pas que sur le scientific park ou sur les sites militaires. Ils nous visent partout. Ah oui, sorry.
我翻译好了，
你帮他好，让你表现一下。
没事讲，我跟他同，我大概知道。
Okay, so this is great. So everybody can see it. Actually, this is probably the first time.
我可以换一下。
好。
你要换一下我讲，要不要？刚好是你讲。
没有，你继续讲，我同步翻译好了。还是你？这里很多人不需要特别为我翻译。
没有，我没有准备翻译的费用，所以你讲。
好，我们晚宴再讲好了。
对。
那开玩笑。
Well, actually, there are some warriors like you mentioned that Taiwan will be able to coverage of all the French media. So also thanks to the Embassy of Taiwan, who has been working on this program for many years, and thanks to the great efforts of also the team of our ambassadors, I think the relationship of the French and Taiwanese has been improved a lot. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. 因为我听不懂，所以我不知道什么时候讲完。
Yes, and so I think we also after the pandemic to echo from what Stéphane has said that our president Taiwan has been on the coverage of many magazines, and nowadays I think people gradually switched from the other I would say the result of Taiwanese politics to the real dangers that today we can see the Chinese threats on Taiwan. So we don't talk about unification, we are talking about invasion. So I think from the terminology, from the vocabularies that we use, we gradually change what we think, because using reunification is kind of brainwash that we have received from the other, I would say, government. So in these magazines, if I don't know if you can still get hold of it, in site they talk about the current situations of the Taiwanese preparations. This is civil defense that Enoch has been devoted to for 3 years before the alliances was created in 2020. So would you like to present maybe a little bit more on that?
Yeah, if I may.
Yes,
if I may. Thank you, and thank you for. Let me just tie it back to what I mentioned earlier, and with what Stéphane had discussed with all of us. So we talked about the sense of urgency that we suspect Beijing is treating the Taiwan issue with, right? And we discussed the sort of lessons learned lessons learned by Beijing over the last decade or so in the way it's conducted its affairs internationally. And we talked about my worry that we're concerned that Beijing's assessment of the international community, if push came to shove in the Taiwan Strait, is that the world would blink. Because we all know China is not Russia. And they know that we know China is not Russia. And they can see it from our words and from our deeds, that the international community is treating China with a lot more, is treading much more carefully than they have with regards to Putin. Okay, and so that is the degree of threat. Stéphane talked about the capability that CCP is building, that it has invested in the PLA over the last 20 years. Intent can change very quickly, but capability takes decades to build, and they've spent decades building that capability, all right? So in that context, oftentimes we talk about what the international community should do, why the international community should care, right? And that's why we're here. But I do want to bring it back and closer to home a little bit here, and maybe take a minute to speak with the Taiwanese amongst us. And the point I would like to make is the international community's position absolutely matters. Yes, we agree. But at the end of the day, we have to be prepared to stand on our own. Okay? If we can't protect it, it's not ours. Right? That's true. That's true with our home, and it's true when it comes to our country. If we can't protect it, it doesn't belong to us. So we have to have that understanding that we need to be there on the front lines on our own. Now, of course, if we don't have friends when we do that, that makes our mission a lot more difficult, right? But we should not, and I don't think we are, sitting around and asking the international community to care and saying, if you don't care, we don't survive, right? We need to be able to take a stand. And so the question is, how do we do that effectively when there's such a huge resource disparity between our forces, between our government and our budget with Beijing's, right? How do we do it in an effective way, in an asymmetric way? Asymmetry is a word we talk about all the time when it comes to defense. What does that really mean? Right? It also means making hard choices. We're about to come, and as we do all that, we have to recognize there is a danger here, because I think a lot of us are in denial deep down about the level of threat. We're in denial because we don't believe Chinese have the intention or will ever have the intention, because we say three things. One, China does not have the capability, but capabilities develop, right? So even if they don't have it today, they may have it tomorrow, and it's clear that they're working towards that. The second thing we talk about is, well, China cannot stand the economic cost. Well, clearly they're addressing that, right? Whether it's with the Made in China 2025 initiative, whether it's we see them addressing that. Also, we're assuming that the Beijing government looks at cost and benefit the same way that democracies do, and that's not necessarily true, right? Certainly, we look at the impact or the lack of impact of sanctions on Russia over the last year and a half, right? I think that's a case in point. And the third thing we point to is China would never provoke Japan and US, which have certainly taken a leading role in the international space and national community on speaking up for Taiwan. Okay, on these three assumptions, my concern is that we don't take the threat seriously, we collectively. Okay, and the danger is, and the cost of erring in that judgment, making that wrong assumption is for us to bear. Okay, so now what to do, right? Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about Forward Alliance. I will very quickly talk about what we need to do across society at different levels and different tiers. Government plays an important role, but not all the role, right? Government is very important, but they cannot shoulder 100% of the responsibility of defending a nation, okay? But it starts with government, for sure, right? So our armed forces, our Ministry of National Defense needs to take a very hard look at how we use limited resources. We're outspent by China 20-1, okay? So we know even if we double, triple our budget, we're not going to be able to solve that disparity, that imbalance. okay? So it's about spending wisely and prioritizing, making sure we look at and we procure and we invest in what is important and what we must have versus what's nice to have, okay? The second thing is, the second tier in our defense posture has got to be investing in our professional first responders, right? People who on a daily basis are responsible for our public safety, our law enforcement, our police, our firefighters, our paramedics. These are our professional first responders that show up on the front lines, whether facing an earthquake or conflict, and they need to understand how to work together in a more complicated environment, right? The same way that Ukrainian firefighters are learning how to do their job in the middle of a conflict zone, right? It's very, very different than putting out fire when things are all fine. So the third part we need to really think about is a territorial defense force, a homeland defense force. And I think Ukraine has demonstrated how that might look. But Ukraine is not the only example, right? In your part of the world, you see many countries with that kind of capability, and that is state-driven, right? I'm not talking about building militias and handing out rifles. Okay, I'm talking about a separate armed forces that's responsible for the defense of the homeland, for the defense of critical infrastructure, for maintenance, for ensuring public safety in times of crisis. Okay, and the fourth layer is absolutely the most important in my view, but the most overlooked, which is a prepared public. Okay, again, look to Ukraine, but you can look past Ukraine at all the conflicts in human history, and you'll see that national resolve, this intangible thing that's called unity, solidarity, right? Endurance, this resilience, right? That is what makes or breaks a country. That is what sustains and supports resistance in a country's defense. And that intangible is what we need to build, and it starts at the community level, it starts at the family level, it starts at the individual level, each person knowing whether we have the ability to keep ourselves safe, to protect our families, and then our neighbors, right? And that's real training. It takes work, rolling up your sleeves, showing up after work on a weeknight when you would rather be having a drink, but you go to training, you learn emergency field care, you learn search and rescue, okay? You learn how to navigate, learn how to use a compass again, how to read a map, how to shelter your neighbors, because in times of crisis, there will be a lot of displaced people, okay? All these skills add up to something that's called a community resilience. All these skills are essentially what we call crisis response, right? And so what Forward Alliance is doing, here's a quick, and to answer Sandy's question, Forward Alliance is an NGO we founded in Taiwan, in Taipei 3 years ago. Unlike a lot of the organizations that have popped up, a lot of the companies that have popped up in recent years, we insist on being nonprofit. I think that's important. And we insist on being not government funded because we think that that independence allows us to move fast. And that allows us to work with government in the most optimal way. And what we're doing, what we've been spending the past couple of years doing is training a volunteer corps of civilians who can step up together in an organized way, right, in case of a disaster. Again, whether it's a 7.4 earthquake or whether it's a worst case scenario that Stéphane had highlighted just now. And it means being organized at the community level to do those functions I talked about. Immediate field care, medical care at point of injury, right, search and rescue, extricating those injured before search dogs show up, before international assistance arrives, because that takes 72 hours, right? And we know the first, right, at moment of impact, what's most important is what you can do immediately, right? The helping hand that neighbors can extend to each other, right? And so this sort of civilian-based crisis response organization is what we've been trying to build. Over the past year, since Ukraine happened, we've seen citizens step up, right? Citizens that look just like you. Married couples show up with their kids in tow, taking 7-year-olds, 10-year-olds to learn how to triage together, how to learn how to stop the bleed, learning the basics in cribbing so that they can help free an injured person that's trapped under debris. Right? That is all work that's being done at the civil society level. And that's absolutely critical, because when we have civil societies that are united, that are confident in their ability to endure hardships, then that buys space for the government That buys time for our first responders in the military to do their professional and very important work, right? But if civil society collapses, right, then we can have the most professional military with the best equipment, but they won't be able to last because they will quickly lose mandate. They will quickly. So we're investing in resilience at the home front. That's what we're doing. And so far over the past year or so, we've had 6,000 civilians step up to say, I want to help. I want to know how I can help, how I can make a difference. And to me, that is really the most significant part of our program. It's not just the hard skills that we train. It's not just crisis response, emergency rescue, search and rescue. Not just that. That's important. But it's about giving citizens a way to pitch in. Citizens who normally aren't in the military, who's not a police officer, who's not part of the reserves, which is half the population, because women are completely excluded from that system. It's giving citizens a way to get involved and to be part of the situation, to be part of the solution. To know that I can matter, I can make a difference in keeping our home safe. And so our goal is through this program, we do two things. We support first responders in those most critical times, because we only have 15,000 firefighter paramedics in all of Taiwan. 15,000, that's a huge number. May not mean anything to you. It's roughly one firefighter paramedic for 15,000 civilians. 1,500 civilians. So 1 out of 1,500. Right? That's less than 1%. So you can imagine in times of crisis, at a national scale, if 1,500 civilians are waiting for that one person to show up, how quickly our emergency response system will collapse, right? So it's creating that volunteer corps that will allow first responders to use them as force multipliers, that will support first responders, so that those most professional capabilities can be deployed to the most urgent areas and the neediest cases, and communities can still help themselves. But the second part here is the impact it has, I think, on communities. When people see that there is this program that everyone is participating in, regardless of political affiliation, where no candidates are here looking to, giving some speeches to, lobby for your vote, where everyone is showing up simply because they want to learn how to help themselves, how to protect their families, and where they're actually taking time out of their busy schedules, on weeknights, on weekends, to learn together, train together. That builds a community that I know France is so keen on maintaining and investing in, right? That sense of community, that sense of solidarity, regardless of where we come from, regardless of our cultural background, regardless of our religion, right? So that sense of solidarity, that is what strengthens and keeps communities together. And that's what we're investing in. And that's why I think our work is so important at the national level and at the local level. Sorry for a very long response.
Thank you very much. I think that's important to explain to you audience what actually we are doing to build the community awareness of the urgency of the war. That actually we have been in this situation of the info war for long. So before the real war attacked, there was already some preparations from the other part. So now it's time for you. If you have questions, raise your hand so that I can pass around the microphones. It doesn't work, okay.
It's right there, I see it. I'm going to get it.
Si, je peux poser une question à M. Stéphane Corcuff, si je peux merci pour l'intervention. J'en ai un point, je pose la question, parce que je pense.
On peut parler plus fort?
Oui,
merci.
C'est bon. Voilà. Alors, je pose la question en français parce que je pense que c'est mieux pour vous. Je vais vous poser une question à M. Louis. Je pose un moment. Alors, première question. Concernant le discours de Macron, comme on a parlé. Alors, en tant que Taïwanais, moi j'aurais une question, c'est que est-ce que la France est un allié encore sûr sur le plan, sur la question de Taïwan? Parce que si on regarde un peu la scène politique de la France, bon, on a la gauche qui hérite toujours cet héritage de la guerre froide, c'est-à-dire l'anti-impérialisme américain. Voilà, c'est clairement, je résume grossièrement ce qui se passe sur le plan politique. Voilà. Premièrement, il y a la gauche qui est radicale, c'est ce qu'on voit. Et puis, l'extrême droite, bon. Alors, je pense qu'il n'y a pas besoin de le dire, parce que c'est l'international qui possède les problèmes internationaux. Donc, voilà, je pense que c'est assez évident sur ce point. Et alors là, intervient le discours de Macron. Là, vous voyez que le centrisme, soi-disant centrisme, n'est plus un allié dessus. Alors, je comprends bien, il y a un décalage entre, c'est-à-dire le sentiment du peuple. Est-ce que la presse a réagi par rapport à ces questions? Il y a une conscience, ou plutôt, je dirais même empathie avec Taïwan, mais il me semble que sur le plan plus gouvernemental, diplomatique, il n'y a pas assez de force et volontaire à défendre la Taïwan. Je ne sais pas, vous êtes d'accord ou pas? Mais ça rejoint aussi à ce que dit M. Ouinon par rapport à cette ambiguïté entre partner et partner and rival. Ça veut dire bien sûr que la philosophie de Carl Schmitt, c'est-à-dire que bon, la politique consiste à faire le partage entre l'ami et l'ennemi. Mais il me semble que justement la France ne peut pas faire cette distinction. Ça, je suis assez long, mais je ne sais pas si c'est clair ou pas. Mais...
Non, rassurez-vous, j'ai compris la question.
Voilà. Mais...
Elle était longue. Alors, j'ai pas la question la plus facile, hein, il faut dire. Je vais quand même essayer de répondre sans trop me faire des ennemis. Bon, je vous ai dit en quelques mots ce que je pense du contexte et de quelques raisons du message d'Emmanuel Macron. Je n'ai pas parlé du contenu lui-même. Bon, je vais élaborer un petit peu plus là-dessus. Comment dire? Bon, je pense que l'intensité des réactions de la presse et de la population civile est déjà plutôt un bon signe. Pas la société civile qui fait la politique diplomatique de la France, mais de plus en plus, dans les sociétés ouvertes, la société civile est un déterminant de la politique diplomatique. C'est très important, ce qui n'est pas le cas en Chine et en Russie. D'accord ? Ensuite, nous sommes un État pluraliste. C'est le gouvernement et la présidence de plus en plus qui fixent la ligne diplomatique et qui conduit la diplomatie de la France. Mais ça n'est pas le seul. On a un oui, je peux aussi changer ça. Bon, mais on a aussi des corps constitués comme le Sénat, l'Assemblée nationale, qui peuvent prendre la parole, qui sont des commissions, qui peuvent faire des résolutions, passer des résolutions, et encourager, condamner, critiquer la politique du président. En outre, on a aussi l'Union européenne qui nous contraint par bien des égards et qui, sur la question chinoise, a changé également. Ça ne veut pas forcément dire qu'elle est plus assertive, pardonnez-moi le mot anglais. Sur la question de Taïwan, j'en veux pour preuve l'arrêt en fait de la négociation sur un accord de libre-échange entre l'Union et l'Europe, l'Union européenne et Taïwan. Bon, c'est pas forcément bon signe, mais le ministre taïwanais des Affaires étrangères était hier à Bruxelles et la vice-présidente du Parlement européen, je ne travaille pas de secret, hein, je peux se passer dans la presse, mais lui a dit qu'elle reconnaissait que l'Union européenne devait progresser dans ses relations avec Taïwan sur un plan politique. C'est quand même intéressant. Alors après, ça n'est que le pouvoir législatif européen. Donc ça, c'est le premier point. Il y a un débat public en France et ça peut quand même aider. Je vous disais tout à l'heure que j'avais été surpris par la surprise du président Macron, qui n'a pas anticipé une telle réaction de la presse et de la société civile. J'avais chopé au passage sur les réseaux sociaux une personne, une femme, je crois, qui disait « Mais enfin, comment peut-on traiter un État comme Taïwan, démocratique comme Taïwan, de la sorte ?» Un État, d'accord, c'était revendiqué, démocratique comme Taïwan, de la sorte, sous-entendu, on a une morale, on est un État démocratique, comment peut-on faire ça? On n'aurait pas entendu forcément ça il y a 3 ans en France, dans les médias, de la part d'une personne qui ne connaît pas du tout Taïwan, probablement. Voilà, donc ça c'est quelque chose que le président n'a pas compris et pas anticipé, je ne sais pas quelles sont les raisons, mais en tout cas la société civile a probablement progressé beaucoup plus vite que lui dans la compréhension de, voilà, de ce qu'elles sont les lignes. Deuxième point, dans sa défense de sa déclaration, qui, comme l'a dit notre ami Antoine tout à l'heure, était à la fois intempestive, c'est-à-dire vraiment faite au mauvais moment, et extrêmement indélicate, je rajoute à ce qu'a dit Antoine, extrêmement dangereuse. Parce que la meilleure façon qu'on a de dissuader la Chine, c'est de la dissuader, pas de dire ce genre de choses. Dans le même temps, Emmanuel Macron a rappelé, pour ceux qui ne savaient pas, c'est à peu près tout le monde, on n'avait pas fait attention, qu'il avait envoyé le prairial dans le détroit de Taïwan. Alors c'est intéressant. Alors il a complété en disant « Nous sommes donc le seul pays européen engagé dans une coopération militaire avec Taïwan ». Faux. C'est pas le cas. Nous avons vendu des armes et la gestion des contrats subséquents qui ne sont pas de rétroactifs ne fait pas de nous un partenaire militaire. Pire encore, la réalité de cet envoi n'est pas du tout de protéger Taïwan, c'est de rappeler que pour la France, ce sont des eaux internationales. Bien entendu, le choix de ce moment rappelle quand même à la Chine que la France veille. Mais j'en profite, excusez-moi, c'est pas exactement la question, mais c'est trop important pour ne pas le dire, que là, avec l'envoi du prairial pour défendre l'idée que le détroit de Taïwan serait des eaux internationales, est en complète contradiction avec la politique d'une seule Chine. Réalisons que nous avons 2 éléments dans notre théorie sur la Chine. Un, on accepte la stratégie chinoise d'une seule Chine qui fait de notre diplomatie une diplomatie qui accepte d'abandonner une partie de sa souveraineté nationale sur ce point. Ce partenaire nous dicte de ne pas entretenir des relations diplomatiques avec un État souverain qui s'appelle la République de Chine, donc à Taïwan, premièrement. Et deuxièmement, nous avons en 1994 commis l'irréparable dans la déclaration conjointe entre Pékin et Paris pour mettre fin à la brouille diplomatique qui avait lieu à la suite de la vente des Mirage et des Lafayette en 1992 et qui avait conduit la Chine populaire à fermer notre consulat à Canton. Mitterrand président, Balladur Premier ministre, dans la cohabitation, en janvier 1994, on cédait à Pékin qui a choisi de manière très brillante et machiavélique les 30 ans de l'ouverture des relations diplomatiques entre Paris et Pékin par le général de Gaulle, en prévoyant que cette commémoration, si la France acceptait nos conditions, pourrait être une commémoration glorieuse et on mettrait un terme à cette brouille. Mais il y avait évidemment là encore un trade-off. C'est pas là encore, c'est la première fois qu'on doit céder, et c'est pour ça que depuis, la France est conduite à chaque fois à devoir céder quelque chose à la Chine pour obtenir quelque chose en échange. Donc on cède du politique pour obtenir de l'économique et des contrats. Et ce qu'on a cédé en 1994, il faut le rappeler, car c'est gravissime. Nous l'avons fait les premiers, et a priori aucun autre grand pays du monde ne l'a fait. Nous avons en janvier 1994, dans le communiqué conjoint Paris-Pékin, reconnu la souveraineté de la République populaire à diriger Taïwan, ce qu'aucun traité international n'a jamais établi. La République populaire de Chine ne peut se prévaloir d'aucun traité international pour établir sa souveraineté sur Taïwan. C'est complètement faux. Le reste, c'est du discours. Nous l'avons fait. Et le problème, c'est que si on a une politique d'une seule Chine qui doit conduire à refuser de reconnaître la République populaire de Chine et que nous considérons que la Chine populaire est souveraine sur Taïwan, alors le détroit de Taïwan est une mer intérieure. Et donc là, on a une contradiction directe du discours gouvernemental français. Moi, je suis tranquille, je suis universitaire, donc j'ai le droit de dire des méchancetés. Mon poste, j'espère, je le garderai. Mais c'est la réalité. Donc, ce que ça veut dire, c'est que nous faisons des complaisances diplomatiques pour des raisons commerciales. Et quand on est un gaulliste qui n'a pas compris le général de Gaulle en 64 et la finesse de son analyse sur la Chine, il faut relire sa conférence de presse du 31 janvier 64. Tout est dedans, tout est dit, y compris les critiques radicales de la République populaire de Chine qui qualifie d'État totalitaire. Eh bien, les gaullistes qui n'ont pas compris ça considèrent qu'en plus de l'économie, il y a une autre raison, c'est vraiment ridicule, d'avoir cette attitude avec la Chine, c'est que la France a un destin de parler de la Chine comme un État élu parmi les États élus. Et quand De Gaulle le dit pour reconnaître la République populaire, on peut comprendre, mais aujourd'hui c'est vraiment ridicule. Donc il est temps d'arrêter ça. Et je pense que le rideau est en train de se déchirer. Il faudrait que plus de personnes prennent la parole pour dénoncer les contradictions, sans forcément appeler à la double reconnaissance, ce que je fais moi directement, pour que plus de précautions soient prises par le gouvernement français et qu'il ne réalise un peu plus vite que la stratégie du PCC à notre égard depuis 1994, puisqu'on a commis cette erreur, c'est à chaque fois de demander de nous imposer ce genre de déclaration en échange de quelque chose de positif, ce que les Allemands n'ont pas à endurer, parce qu'ils n'ont jamais fait ça. Donc j'ai bon espoir que ça change. Mais il est vrai, pour revenir à votre question, que c'est un peu un maillon faible, la France, les alliés de Taïwan, pour l'instant, parce qu'on n'a pas le courage de réaliser qu'en tant que régime démocratique qui promeut sur la scène internationale les valeurs démocratiques, et c'est une politique explicite de la France, et bien que dans les cas où la question est urgente et se pose aujourd'hui, nous ne pouvons pas vendre notre âme pour des contrats, parce que c'est nous qui paierons la note, nous tous les États démocratiques, à la fin. Excusez-moi, j'étais un peu long, mais voilà, je m'emballe tout de suite quand je réponds à ce question. Et il avait une deuxième question pour oui, mais il ne l'a pas encore posée.
Est-ce qu'on peut peut-être laisser, on va laisser aux autres de poser d'abord une fois la question et puis on reviendra vers ceux qui ont déjà posé la question.
那就晚一点再问你，他想问你的问题，因为我可能讲太久了。
Hello, Nicholas. I'm attorney in law and law in France. I have one question for both of you. So my first question is, in your opinion, if this war is inevitable, what are the signs that people living in Taiwan should be looking at to know that something is changing or is coming and that we are close at the war? Mr. Corcuff, I have another question. Why is France not sending any more arms to Taiwan? And do you have hope to see France sell arms once again to Taiwan? Ambassador, our president doesn't speak very much and not very often directly to our people about this question. Do you know why? And we all know that our finances are very well in Taiwan. Why did she choose to reimburse debt and not increase our military budget? Thank you.
Yeah, okay. 有，OK， 好。
我是那个法国现在台湾民国的会长，然后我们7月1号会成立新的会员，如果有人有兴趣进参加，欢迎来找我，谢谢。
谢谢。好，要继续问是不是 ？OK。他稍微问说为什么为什么不提高那个国防预算？对啊，他问大使，我要说，对啊。OK， 好，这个所以要回答了吗？第一个，开始直接了吗 ？OK， 好 ，OK， 那个 ，Hello， 喂，可以哈 ，All right，
Thank you. Thanks for the questions. And I think we've come to an agreement that we will try to answer as succinctly and crisply as we can, so that we can get to more of your questions. On the last question for the ambassador, I know he will have a more comprehensive response. I'm just going to throw one number at you. Taiwan actually spends a lot on defense. We spend, roughly, if I'm not mistaken, our budget for this year is we spend over one fourth of our national budget on defense-related expenses. So, Ministry of National Defense, procurements, personnel, veterans affairs, okay, all that combined, and special budget is over over a quarter of our national budget, okay, and that is a lot. Because there's healthcare, there's education, there's the economy, there's everything else, paving the roads, okay? And so the question is not how to spend more, in my mind, right? Again, we face a resource disparity that's 20 to 1. The question is how do we spend more wisely, okay? I think that's where we need to spend more work on, right? A lot of the programs that are nice to have, honestly, need to be restructured and pushed back, okay? The question you asked me was, what are signs that the tensions are rising? That unfortunately, we're seeing these signs every day, right? The escalation from Beijing, from the PLA, okay, every single day. If you look at the number of flights around Taiwan, right? Around our ADIZ, Air Defense Identification Zone, close to it, now cutting the corners of it, right? From the year 2020 to 2021 to 22 to this year, right, we're talking about not just exponential growth, sometimes it's doubling from the year before, the number of these sorties, right? That is not very peaceful, that is not very conciliatory, okay? August of last year, the military exercises, you guys all remember that? Okay, after Nancy Pelosi's visit, China executed what it had long planned for, okay, a series of military exercises around Taiwan, the island, lobbing missiles near and over Taiwan into our surrounding waters. And let me be more specific, not just into our surrounding waters, literally drawing these testing sites, right? The 6 sites that they were testing missiles on, that cut into our territorial waters within 12 nautical miles of our shores, right? Now vessels and planes that are crossing the median line, this is happening and taking place with increasing frequency, with or without foreign visits, okay? And so these are all signs and data points, pattern of behavior that tell us this is not stopping anytime soon, okay? And the concern is that they will continue to push and push and push until status quo, which Sandy referred to earlier, until status quo is completely changed to their favor. And it's up to us, and to the extent our international partners are willing to take part, to push back and to draw a line. Okay, I know you have 2 more questions for my counterparts on stage. So,
merci. Alors, sur la question des armes, c'est encore une fois une question super dangereuse. Hein. Merci Nicolas. Alors, déjà, c'est pas mon domaine de recherche. J'ai une mécanique française des ventes d'armes qui est très compliquée et qui est en fait une question diplomatique. Pour ce qui est des armes sur le Taïwan, une question diplomatique et parfois de corruption, bien sûr. Ça va pour le coup sur les ventes d'armes un peu avec, dans le cas que j'ai en tête. Alors, moi je pense que sur un plan stratégique, il le faut. D'abord parce qu'il faut éviter une guerre qui nous retombera dessus. Sur un plan stratégique, il le faut pour une deuxième raison, c'est que la France est une puissance indo-pacifique, qu'on a une marine là-bas et qu'on sait qu'elle sera mobilisée en cas de guerre dans le détroit de Taïwan. Alors, notre intérêt national est pensé comme étant, disons, cynique et maximisé. Si on participe à une guerre pour aider Taïwan à se défendre, il vaut mieux vendre des armes à Taïwan pour qu'ils fassent le plus gros eux-mêmes. Mais c'est pas comme ça que la décision politique est prise, car notre pays a un problème d'être prisonnier des ornières de cette stratégie chinoise qui nous est imposée et dont je parlais, qui est la politique d'une seule Chine. Je rappelle que si la Chine n'imposait pas, à chaque fois qu'elle noue des relations diplomatiques à un État, que ce dernier rompe ses relations diplomatiques avec Taïwan, nous aurions tous des relations diplomatiques avec Taïwan, sauf peut-être, à l'époque de la guerre froide, les États communistes. Intéressant, la France n'a jamais rompu ses relations diplomatiques avec la République de Chine. C'est intéressant de le rappeler. De Gaulle a laissé l'initiative à Chiang Kai-shek et pendant quelques semaines a de fait pratiqué une politique d'une seule Chine, de deux Chines. Et si de Gaulle avait tenu et que surtout Chiang Kai-shek n'avait pas décidé avec ses conseillers de rompre avec la France, la République populaire de Chine à l'époque n'aurait pas eu la puissance de nous l'imposer. D'ailleurs, pendant plusieurs années, on en parlait récemment à l'ambassade, c'est un élément que je vous apportais. Avec la France, c'est-à-dire en gros on va dire le Japon, les États-Unis, je choisis les pays à dessein, mais vous comprendrez pourquoi. L'Australie, le Canada, la Grande-Bretagne, la France, l'Inde, choisissent de concert une double reconnaissance, la Chine ne peut pas s'y opposer. Mais il faudrait le faire de concert, il faudrait qu'on en parle, et il faudrait qu'on élabore un concept géopolitique qui permettrait de trouver cette option légitime, tout comme l'Indo-Pacifique, un certain jour du début des années 2010 est passé d'une notion géographique à un concept géopolitique qui a été proposé par qui? Quelqu'un qui n'est pas très apprécié, qui n'était pas très apprécié malheureusement, Abe Shinzo. Voilà, donc on peut avoir des idées très en avance et de dire il est temps de mettre un frein à cette politique diplomatique sauvage de la République populaire de Chine qui nous conduit à se couper les bras de notre souveraineté et à dire si nous voulons entretenir des relations diplomatiques avec la République de Chine à Taïwan, on le fait, c'est pas eux qui décident. Le problème maintenant, c'est qu'à Taïwan, comme vous le savez, il n'y a pas de consensus sur cette République de Chine. Et ça, c'est un problème. Je ne vais pas en parler maintenant parce que là, je peux en parler longtemps. Mais si c'est un sujet qui vous intéresse, la souveraineté, le nom du régime, qu'est-ce qui se passe, comment ça évolue et qu'est-ce qu'on peut imaginer, moi, je suis tout à fait pour, mais peut-être pas une autre fois. Tu m'as promis de nous inviter avec Antoine un jour.
Alors, on m'a posé une question. Moi, je préfère répondre comme ça parce que je trouve l'enceinte n'est pas très claire. La question qui m'a été posée, parce que cette année, à Taïwan, on a eu un statut de financement qui est excédentaire. Donc, monsieur m'a demandé pourquoi on n'a pas utilisé l'argent sur la défense
la caméra,
et on les a distribués au peuple. Alors, premièrement, vous savez très bien, nous sommes dans un pays démocratique. C'est parce que cette année, on a une très bonne santé de situation financière qu'on doit immédiatement l'allouer dans la défense. Ça, c'est la première chose. Deuxième chose, on m'a demandé pourquoi nous augmentons pas nos budgets de défense. Nous les augmentons actuellement. Peut-être pas d'une façon satisfaisante, mais c'est le plan. Surtout, ce qui est important de ma part, c'est vraiment une préparation psychologique du peuple taïwan que Wu Nong l'a évoqué tout à l'heure. Nous sommes en train de préparer. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a?
Parce que nous, on est sur YouTube, donc
nous sommes en train de préparer psychologiquement notre défense. Et moi, je pense l'armement de Taïwan, c'est-à-dire a déjà un certain avantage. Si vous regardez tous les statistiques de défense sur Taïwan, nous sommes quand même la 20e puissance militaire du monde. Donc, c'est plutôt sur le plan psychologique du peuple qu'on doit le préparer. Alors, une autre chose, je pense, même si on se prépare sur le plan militaire, vous devrez savoir qu'on est en face de la deuxième puissance militaire du monde. Et nous ne le sommes pas, c'est un petit pays. Et nous ne serons jamais capables de se mesurer totalement contre la Chine sur le plan militaire. Et ce n'est pas bon non plus pour le développement de Taïwan. Déjà, on a su prouver qu'on était très fort sur le plan démocratique, sur le plan des valeurs, sur le plan industriel, sur le plan de la politique de la santé publique. Nous ne pouvons pas tout faire. Alors, ce qui est l'avantage de Taïwan et qui tient le cœur de tout le monde, ce sont nos industries de semi-conducteurs. Moi, je pense la seule façon efficace pour être réaliste, c'est de encore renforcer ce secteur, cette industrie de semi-conducteurs à Taïwan, et c'est ça qui va vous amener, vous obliger aussi à contribuer pour la paix du monde. Je crois que c'est le plus important. Je peux vous dire, si nous attendons que la guerre éclate, ce qui va coûter le plus cher, ce qui est le moins cher, ce que ça va moins sacrifier la vie des gens, c'est la prévention. Donc moi je pense ce que Taïwan doit maintenant faire, c'est de renforcer, d'investir encore plus sur nos savoir-faire de la technologie et de convaincre, obliger le monde à s'y intéresser à la paix du détroit, et c'est comme ça qu'on aura la paix. Voilà, donc je pense, bien sûr on est en train de faire sur la défense, mais on le fait encore plus sur le plan industriel, et là, ça va vraiment amener tout le monde à contribuer pour la paix du détroit de Taïwan. Merci.
My question is for Mr. Enoch Wu.
C'est à qui, à moi?
Mr. Wu.
Ouais.
Yes. Thank you so much for your intervention, and I found your Lyon program fascinating and inspiring. I think it's really critical to empower civilians for first aid, as you mentioned, living maps, and solidarity, as you mentioned, among people. And I was wondering if you would consider extending this solidarity not only for health and emergency and also combat readiness for civilians. I know there's the reservist program, and I've seen also some articles about more and more civilians getting interested in weapons training and other forms of self-defense. Do you think this also plays a role as civilians also learning how to defend themselves and their loved ones? Would that also be part of the overall program with the different echelons you mentioned to defend Taiwan? Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Nope, you need it.
Thank you. So I appreciate the question. The question is, would Forward Alliance consider doing more combat training for civilians? We decided very early on that our training is about building communities, right? Strengthening communities, giving people a way to give back and to help each other. And we think saving lives, learning how to save lives, is the common denominator that has the most potential to cut through partisan politics, to cut through ideology, and achieve those objectives. And so we are very clear that our job is to train folks in how to help each other, giving them a way to give back, and decidedly, and we intentionally do not teach folks how to make IEDs and Molotov cocktails. So that is not our goal. I think we have the best chance to unite the public behind life-saving initiatives, life-saving skills. And to be honest, these skills are important whether in a natural disaster or a man-made conflict. These skills are transferable, and really when a community faces a shock faces a contingency and adversity of the scale that we're imagining, right? It doesn't matter if a building has toppled because of a missile or an earthquake, right? You need the same skills at the community level.
plus près, si possible.
Merci. Merci pour j'apprécie beaucoup d'être là. Alors donc, c'est la suite de en fait, aujourd'hui, le vrai problème à Taïwan, c'est qu'à l'intérieur de Taïwan, on n'a pas cette consensus, n'est-ce pas? Et donc, je m'adresse à monsieur Enoch, c'est qu'à notre génération, pour être clair, moi je suis venue étudier en France, c'est là que j'ai eu la France à l'issue de la vente de l'arme. C'était en 1990. Je suis venue étudier ici. Voilà. Et là, donc moi, je fais partie de la génération de 70. La question pour vous, c'est que, pour moi, où est notre avenir? Et donc, pour la plupart d'entre nous, nous projetons qu'un jour, vous devrez sur la scène internationale, mais aussi nationale. À ce moment-là, si un jour vous allez devenir peut-être le candidat président ou le président, quelle serait la stratégie que vous projetez pour d'abord réduire cette gap entre le bleu et la partie verte?
你继续没关系，你继续我做法翻译没关系。
好了，我来，来。
我的问题是，
你是我们的未来啦哈，然后他1970年出生的啦哈，然后你是我们的未来哈啊，有一天哦，未来如果你在国内台湾呢，你成为总统的话哈，你如何破除哈蓝绿之间的那个差异啦？好。
Jamais on arrive à intégrer les deux pensées unies. Et ça, c'est la faiblesse de nous, les Taïwanais.
怎么找到共识啊？
你会觉得怎么样可以？
你将来怎么解决这蓝绿？因为台湾的问题就是蓝绿，蓝永远不听绿，绿也不听蓝哦，它就永远是分裂的。好，用英文。哪一方面？
好难哦。
OK， 我们还在努力。
用英文来，用英文来 ，English。
哦，
没关系，如果你是比较，
你要做，然后再发文，
我们来翻译，
我们来翻译。
英文也可以啊 ，we're still working on it. It's difficult. As you know, democracies are messy, right? And I think that's the way it should be, right? Because like a family, we bicker, we argue. Hopefully, we don't come to blows. But after we bicker and argue, we find a way to come together again and agree on a path forward. And civility in politics is so tough to maintain and to enforce, right? It really takes every single person when confronted with a choice, to reach down, reach deep into that higher calling, that higher purpose, right? That higher vision. And to elevate our discourse, or to revert to the easiest way of attack. And I think it's a challenge to voters, because voters ultimately decide who gets elevated and who will represent us. And it's a challenge for policymakers and candidates who run for office, because they need to present their best self. For the public. And so I think it's I don't have an answer. I failed multiple times, and I'm still failing in that endeavor. but it really does take, it takes the entire society to say, everyone from voters, candidates, media as well, right? Media, what kind of discourse, what kind of argument and dialogue do you want to spread? And what story do you want to tell, right? And it's always easy to, again, to revert to the most primitive emotional arguments, but you know, I think this challenge will forever remain with us, right? I think as long as we remain a democracy, and my belief is that we will remain a democracy, a healthy, vibrant, noisy democracy for as long as until we are in our 5th republic, okay? But it takes work. I don't have an easy answer, and it takes work by folks like you who decide that on a sunny Sunday we're going to come out and sit here in a basement for 3 hours to talk about these issues, and it takes work on voting day to show up to the polls, whether you're a voter in France or in Taiwan, and because that's the loudest, that's the most vocal way you can express your preferences and your expectations. I don't know if I'm sure Ambassador Wu has more words of wisdom.
Okay, allow me to give you another way to think about our national problem. We do have this problem between Green Party and the Blue Party. But if you compare to France, they also have the same problem. They have an extreme left and an extreme right. And I don't think you can imagine that extreme left and the extreme right will have a common project for the future of France. So that is, I mean, if you live in a democracy, that's just a normal situation. And I can tell you, we even have more consensus than France, because since we are a democracy, every time, except Chen Shui-bian in 2000, every president was always elected by more than 50%. Taiwan was even elected by 58%. In France, look at every president for the first term. First round. Thank you. Jacques Chirac, I think, is only 18 or 19%. Can you imagine that? Even Emmanuel Macron, for the first time, not this time, but the first time 7 years ago, is maybe 30%. So you can find that in Taiwan, our president even have a stronger consensus elected by the people. So our problem is not so serious as you imagine. And the result is that if you look at outside Taiwan, our country just works so well. We are even listed by the world, the 8th or the 7th best democracy of the world. Much better than France, than Germany, than USA, than Ukraine, than UK. Only Northern European countries better than us. So if you look at this side, I think Taiwan still have a very good future, but we need to really build our defense capability, because no country in the world has such a strong authoritarian country and that are determined to attack us. This is China. France don't have this kind of enemy. So I think Taiwan actually is just in some way a very successful story, a story that inspires. It's also, I always say that it's one of the very strong reasons that for the past 3 years we got so many support in the public opinion. And if we can obtain the majority support of the public opinion, and then we will be safe. And I still think we will be safe. Please add something. Hey, yeah, agree with me. Thank you. You want to add something? Mr. President. Our future.
这样我就不敢接了。
Especially during this period, isn't it?
That's right. As the president of the Ford Alliance, let me. I mean, I can't put it better than Ambassador Wu has. I would also add here that there are issues that ought to transcend politics, right? There are issues that ought to be non-partisan, right? And for Taiwan, defense has got to be one of them, right? One of the few policies. And so I fully expect this as we embark in about 7 months' time, in the next 7 months on our next national level election. I hope that political parties, candidates, and civil society can take this issue seriously, and we can see a very constructive debate on how to move forward and use the upcoming campaign to form that consensus. Maybe not on economic issues, maybe not on environmental issues, but definitely on defense, right? And we'll do our hardest, even from a civil society side, to make sure that happens.
Do you have anything else? Oh yeah, please.
Thank you very much
Sorry.
for the conference and for the very interesting discussion. So I had two questions. The first one was about the microprocessors. We talked a little bit at the beginning. So as you say, it's very important for Taiwan to keep independence in this industry to protect itself. Why do you think that the fact that you also, or TSMC, started to build a factory in Arizona in the US might be a risk if there is a change in administration in the US in the future, that the US might not have Taiwan because they think that they will be self-reliant on microprocessor, and for the long term here, of course. And my other question, also kind of about the US. In the US, I think they have this strategic ambiguity that they manage to maybe beat better than us, and they have this Taiwan Defense Act in which they recognize one China, but they also sell weapons to Taiwan, or they're supposed to. Do you think there is a probability that in Europe such kind of deal might be signed one day? Thank you.
Semiconductor. You need to look at the percentage of. You need to look at the percentage of our semiconductor produced in the future in the US. I think it will be only 5%. 5% of our semiconductor producer in the US in the future, and we are also trying to make some deal with Europe. So maybe in the near future, you will see also a Taiwanese decision to build a new semiconductor manufacturing factor in Europe. The one who advances the most is in Japan. But even you accumulate all these kind of semiconductor production in Europe, in US, in Japan, it was less than 10%. Again, we are not so naive. If we localize all our production, of course, we will lose some kind of obligation of you to try to help us, to assist us to maintain the stability. One of the very important reasons that we work with Europe, with the US, with Japan is because the need of the semiconductor were explode in a very high-speed way. So, of course, we need to work with democratic countries. And another thing that the world forgets is that if you look at precisely how the chips was produced, it is really a result of democratic country or like-minded country. First of all, the design in majority, it comes from US and Europe. Then you need the machine that was made in Netherlands, the ASML. And then you need a TSMC to organize it. And later, a lot of people don't know that we need also a very important chemical product to finalize the chip. That is bus made from Germany. That is Air Liquide from France, and a lot of Japanese enterprises. And then you have the chips. China plays no role in this kind of the production supply chain.
So if you have European country, Japan, US working on this supply chain, certainly you will, in the future, you need to work with this country. It's what we are doing. So build a new factory in US, in Europe, and Japan. So I think it is just to prove somewhere that in the future, the semiconductor will be made by all these like-minded countries and will be assured also by all these countries. And again, I insist again, in the Taiwan Strait, we will have peace and stability if we work together.
Okay. Behind the schedule, but we can stay here until 5 o'clock. And I think everybody is probably eager to take photos with our speakers
Maybe we should
later.
talk about, on devrait parler des outils mais juste pour faire la promo de ça, des outils qu'on a pour développer, pour promouvoir Taïwan, notamment la remontée. Mais je peux le faire maintenant, si tu veux.
La conclusion. 那个 Sandy 让他 conclusion 啦。OK。
所以要先最后一个问题结束了之后，然后再高老师再那个。
谢谢三位，所以我的问题是想给吴怡农大使。
吴怡农有你的，
跟大使，他说大使。身为在海外台湾人，不管在美国，就是我们的心都在台湾，但是要身体力行去，比如说参加照顾台湾的这些行动，其实很难。那除了冲回家投票，然后除了捐款，有没有其他方式可以就您在 NGO 界或其实在地的这些影响，有什么事情是我们这些心在台湾但是人无法身体力行的这些台湾人可以做到的？然后我们很幸运，其实曾经，就是法国台湾协会做了这么多的活动跟努力，让我们在海外台湾可以发一点声，然后做出一点可以做的努力来帮助台湾。那大使有没有什么方式是我们侨民可以一起跟大使在使馆后来做努力的？就是有没有什么回馈到台湾？
Alors en principe, la question est déposée, quels sont le rôle et le travail des Taïwanais d'outre-mer peut contribuer pour promouvoir Taïwan et pour protéger Taïwan. Donc la question est déposée à notre monsieur Enoch, futur président, et moi. Je le fais exprès là. 我故意的，没有，没事，他没听懂，没关系。Il n'a pas compris, donc c'est pas grave. 好，你就回答用英文回答那个，然后我等下再回答。
我还在等那个 OK， 这样我接不下去。那个I mean， 除了您说的
用英文回答，用法文，因为我刚才有用法文去讲。用英文。
OK， 那我就用那个英文回答。
台湾人可以做什么
？Yeah， well, first, I think I'd encourage everyone to be more active members of their community. Okay, I'm sitting next to our ambassador to France, and he's done incredible work for our country. I would encourage you to see yourself as an ambassador of Taiwan as well, in your company, in your community, and where you live. Reach out to your community, fully immerse yourself, and show everyone around you through how you interact with them, through who you are, what Taiwan is, right? Let them see how open, energetic, compassionate Taiwan is. Let them see that through you and your work in your community. I think that is the most substantive way we can all help, because that's where you build trust and that sense of solidarity. And when I say community, we got to think bigger than just our immediate surroundings. We're doing excellent work here with the Formose Association, and so take part in more activities, take part in civil society, right, and participate in civil society. When you said vote, if you have the right to vote in France, vote here, right? Make sure that France policies, make sure that French perspectives and the political establishment also reflects your view. Since you, as a member of the French community, if you can vote in Taiwan, welcome home to vote as well. you knew that I was going to say donate, okay? Because there are a lot of groups in Taiwan on the ground that are doing important work that rely on your donation and your support. And so whether it's through 一个小额捐款, whether it's helping them spread the word online, I think these are all ways that you can help them and make them feel the warmth and love. Now, for that, did I answer everything? Yes. Okay.
Okay. At the beginning, I say, look at the title. Today we are talking about Taiwan's battle for peace. I think you need to have confidence that what we are doing is not only concern Taiwan, but really concern the peace of the world. But because what China is doing really worries us. For me, at the beginning, I raised the three levels: the public opinion, military, and the industry. And I can tell you, for me, the most efficiency is the public opinion. And what we have made the big progress during, for example, my 5-year term here, and during the 7 years of Madam Taiwan governance. So the public opinion for me is the most important and also the easier way. Because in public opinion, everyone feel free. Those people who hear about you are not afraid of the pressure from China. You are talking about military cooperation or even economic cooperation or even product exchange. In their mind, they are always what China will react. But public opinion don't worry about the Chinese pressure. So for me, the best way is trying to talk Taiwan to your friends in France, everywhere. We are not Chinese, we are Taiwanese. Taiwan represents the best part of the Chinese culture. We are the most important value that we represent is that a Chinese-speaking society can live very, very well with universal value, that is democracy and liberty. We prove it when we do our manage for the COVID-19 crisis. Taiwan is almost one of the only country in the world that was never confined, was never isolated. So we prove that the democracy do work, and just continue to talk about the story of Taiwan, let the world know about Taiwan, and I think the public opinion will be on our side.
Alors, pour conclure brièvement, et en répondant à votre question, si moi je peux me permettre qui ne suis pas taïwanais, je dirais que, comme l'a dit Enoch, la démocratie, c'est le bonheur du débat. J'ai fait ma thèse sur les Wei-Sheng-Ren à Taïwan. C'est pas rien, parce que les Wei-Sheng-Ren sont considérés, les descendants des continentaux, sont considérés comme ceux qui ont le plus de mal avec la transition identitaire et la taïwanisation. Ce que j'ai montré avec ma thèse, c'est une découverte passionnante. C'est que la vertu de la démocratie, c'est d'avoir subsumé ces différences et d'avoir permis à une sorte de consensus d'émerger sans conflit. Je ne dis pas qu'il n'y a pas de conflit et d'opposition aujourd'hui, il y en a, bien sûr. Mais en tout cas, la beauté de la démocratie, voilà, il n'y a pas de raison de s'en inquiéter. Par contre, à l'extérieur, les Taïwanais, ils doivent rester unis. Vous êtes, comme les Français, des spécialistes de vous diviser quand vous êtes dans des pays étrangers. Et ça brouille le message. Alors, je ne veux pas dire qu'il faut inventer une harmonie là où il n'y en a pas, mais éviter les questions qui sont divisibles entre vous. Les gens qui n'aiment pas le drapeau, les gens qui n'aiment pas la République de Chine, les gens qui disent que Taïwan n'est pas souverain. Tout ça, c'est peut-être vrai selon certaines interprétations du droit international, sauf que ça nuit à Taïwan. Et en fait, la division des Taïwanais entre vert et bleu, ou conscience chinoise, conscience taïwanaise, anti-indépendance et anti-unification. Ces gens-là, en fait, tant que vous débattez entre vous, c'est pas ce qui va faire qu'un pays comme la France va vous soutenir ou pas. Ça le deviendra un problème géopolitique quand l'allégeance nationale de ceux qui ne veulent pas d'un État national taïwanais vont commencer à vendre des secrets d'État, des secrets militaires, à vendre la souveraineté taïwanaise à la Chine. Là, ça posera un problème, et c'est le cas. Donc, en fait, en interne, la beauté de la démocratie, c'est d'autoriser ce débat et de ne pas trop vous angoisser
avec en face de vous des gens qui pensent le contraire de ce que vous pensez, et vous qui pensez que ça va avoir un impact terrible sur la situation géopolitique de Taïwan. C'est angoissant, je suis le premier à le dire. Mais la bottom line, c'est là où les gens franchissent la frontière de l'illégalité, comme certains le font, des généraux à la retraite, et pas seulement des gens, qui vont vendre des secrets militaires de Taïwan à la Chine. Ça, c'est angoissant. Mais, en dehors de ça, la démocratie, c'est pas un problème, et le débat en interne ne devrait pas trop être vu comme une source d'inquiétude. Continuez à débattre, parce que c'est du débat que le consensus peut émerger, et d'une certaine manière, il est quand même en bonne voie. Et soyez unis à l'extérieur. Voilà. Et merci à tous de votre venue. Merci beaucoup à tous les deux aussi de toutes vos réponses passionnantes. Merci de votre invitation. Et puis, on peut continuer dehors, mais il faut qu'on y aille. Voilà.
Donc, je vous invite, pour ceux qui souhaitent prendre les photos, vous pouvez venir avant, ici devant, voilà, devant les projets. Ça, on peut peut-être éviter l'ambiance de la sortie.
On va enlever les tables. Oh bah, on peut laisser ça, mais on enlève les chaises, je pense.
我刚刚跟他们建议说啊，就是要照相的，大家在这边排队，一起这样来，然后这样我们才可以有些人可以上去啊，干嘛才不会都挤在门口，这样好不好？
不好意思，我先把衣服脱光了。
对，你这样子，等一下，你如果这样子的话，我可能会开始。
我现在还有多本，
我
15本啊，那我
在这边好不好？好不好？在这边，Ken，可不可以在这边好不好？这样子人少一点。对，我来。